For those of you, and I know that there are many of you, who have some difficulty that your nervous system continues to respond when I talk about the dominant submissive dance. And after first introducing it and bouncing back to it several times and now laying on it fairly heavily for the last 6 or 8 months on and off, some of you are used to hearing the words, and yet if you would look right into your own little nervous system, you would see that it bounces back like a good old first-class New York tight-wound spring and resists the whole notion. It's like, I can just see it on your faces and some of you out there, that the words go in and you know generally the kind of groundwork I'm laying, and it's like you let it pass. It's like me calling red green, and you just let it go. Your nervous system goes on and say, well, where can we go from here? I want to see. Well, I understand this. It's not your fault individually. But all over this planet, if you tried to tell people that everything is divided up into the powerful and the powerless, or for my own reasons when I'm speaking this particular way, I say the dominant and the submissive, people go, no. That's the way life is. You should know that. And if I tried to carry this message some way into the city, people in the city would really denounce it, and for specific reasons. They would immediately say things like, well, you are culturally blind, or they would say you are socially prejudiced, or they would say that I was economically deranged in my theories. In other words, they would say that the whole concept has got to be some kind of inside-out form of fascism, that I'm just fixing to lead up and say, well, there's one group that always is going to be downtrodden, and there's this other group, and chances are I would be on one side. Well, not chances are in the city. They'd know I was on some side. It just hadn't come out yet. That I'm trying to stir up a real revolution by being with the downtrodden, or else I'm an undercover big shot, that I really got some power somewhere and big money, friends that are out of power in Europe or somewhere, and so I'm going to protect them or try to defend them verbally. I understand that, and you should understand and find it, as always, at least topographically, immediately interesting that you are wired up to feel that way when there's no basis for it. You can't find any basis for it here. What I was going to try to do is get some of you to see how blatant, how simple the reality of there being the dominant and the submissive, and there's a purpose for it. But first I'm going to see, I think tonight, if I can't get some of you to at least get a glimpse. I know your nervous system will take back over, and it might take you weeks or months for the glimpse to come back, but as many of you know by now, once you get a kind of clear perception of something new, you can't really forget it. And you can start dancing and skating around closer, even if you're not dancing, hanging around the dance floor. And the tango pilots, you can keep trying to slip over closer to where it was that you saw this before. And maybe the strange muse will show back up. So here it is. You can hear this, can you not? That there is a, I'll be nice, give you some breathing room, an almost universal denial of responsibility. That is wired into everybody. Now just forget all stuff about powerful and powerless. Am I not correct? Is that not just as plain as the piss in your boot? That almost universally people from the high positions and with whom you may come in contact to the lowest man laying in the gutter trying to bum money, and if you say something to them about responsibility, almost universally you're talking to a man with a title, assistant secretary to the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. And it takes you 6 months, you get an appointment, and you see the guy, and you tell him some complaint you got. Your congressman got you in finally. And you tell him how it is you've been mistreated by the government, by his office. And he'll look at it and say, well, it may or may not be. You may have some justified complaint, but I'll tell you this. I'm not personally responsible. All the way to that, the guy comes up shuffling and saying, could you give me a quarter to eat? You say, why don't you get a job like me? I'm breaking my buns now trying to live, and the government pushing me in one thing, and then people like you. Well, why do you live like this? You're going out and drink it. No. Well, plus, I'm not responsible for being like this. You think I chose to be like this? It is an almost universal wiring. It's not psychological, not sociological, not economic, not political, not religious, not racial, not cultural, not sexual. It's humanal. It's lifeinal. And it is not something that you have acquired. It's not something you picked up. It is no show of weakness, unless you call being human weak. I don't care to go into that right now. It is almost universal. You don't have to look. You don't have to look at it as being a form of criticism to the people apparently out there. It is in you. It is in you. It's not psychological. It's not something to attack. I'm not picking on you. You should know this. Strangers can come up to you on the street. You can be driving down the street. Somebody can pull up beside you and say something about, do you realize that your car, the sticker is out on your tag? We pay taxes. I keep mine up. You're not responsible. You know that. Something happened. I can make up the story, but if you were sitting there, apparently you'd make it up immediately. I just bought the car from somebody. It's always not your responsibility. Almost universal. Now, do you see that that is the same thing as almost no one wanting to be dominant? It is just a nom de guerre. It is a synonym. It is another way of putting, I am submissive. I know I'm submissive. I can't put it in words. I don't put it in those words. If you described it that way, I might want to even deny it. But to disclaim responsibility is another way, literally, of your nervous system, and now using human words, but of your nervous system saying, I am powerless, I am submissive. The way I'm going to use them tonight, they're not literally, I'm trying to get you to see they're not exactly synonymous from a certain view, but I'm going to give you a choice so you can play around. It is the powerless, the submissive. And remember, you're born submissive. You're born powerless if indeed you are now powerless. You didn't get that way in life. You didn't get to be submissive to take one of the two possible choices and to arbitrarily and to clinically define one person as being absolutely submissive, which is not quite that simple, but to call you that way, you didn't learn it. It does not come about through trauma. Your parents could have beat the piss out of you. That may be true, but that's not what made you submissive. Being born is what made you submissive. The particular genital line in which you were born was submissive. And what you were saying, in essence, in words, by denying responsibility, no matter how it's done. To deny responsibility is for the powerless to say, I am quite pleased. It is for the submissive to say, I would not have it another way. And yet, the one reason I wanted to point out this way, that I know many of your nervous systems, when I first started talking about that, and even sometimes now, your nervous system says that's not true. And of course, if it says that, it's primarily saying that's not true about you. That is, that I want to be dominant. I like pushing people around. Well, I like to be dominant. I do not want to be dominated. And so that is not true. That is why I say it. And your nervous system says that is not universally true. I can't even see that it's overwhelmingly true. But it is. Now, you should realize this. I guess I should jump over here if I have to, and I'm going to realize there is a hierarchy in everything. Or to put it another way, if you correctly understood it, everything is relative. A lot more so than the popularizers of quantum physics and Einstein's thinking and all that, but everything is indeed relative, but not just at the 3D level. There is a hierarchy of dancing, and that's why I was saying that it is arbitrary, it is flawed for me to pick out anybody, a bum laying in the street, that people can kick, and he almost says, thank you, sir, thank you, appreciate that. For me to say that that bum is totally submissive is not necessarily true, because once he gets a drink in him, once he arouses himself for the day, there's probably somebody somewhere that he kicks. And he knows where they are. There is a hierarchy of coming down or coming up, any way you want to look at it. I've already pointed out that human perception, the way people are wired up in the city, you could say that the ultimate submission is people believing in a God, in a figure, in a force, something outside this system, something that made this system, that went from the thing to this, and it went boom, and there you are. Now to believe that, which there's something wired up, again, this is no cultural folly. There's something wired up in the human nervous system, and it comes out as gods. Now, I've tried to point out in various ways, but very directly, the simplest way to start out is the idea of God is the ultimate submission. And based upon my description of this dance, it is not incorrect, because if there was such a thing, there ain't no doubt. We're all dancing backwards. If it was otherwise, if you had the ability not to dance backwards, I would have to label you a first-class fool, because if the big guy was watching, I'd be dancing backwards. If I knew that he was going to look at a certain time, I'd dance backwards just as fast as anybody else and just smile. It is the ultimate submission. It is the ultimate acquiescence of submission, that we are powerless. I cannot do anything. I am impotent. All right. Then you start coming down a hierarchy, literally. And nobody, for any useful purposes for me to even discuss, nobody could usefully be described as being absolutely dominant and somebody absolutely submissive. As I said, if we picked out the leading in some area, or even the whole planet, at any given time, if we picked out the greatest tyrant, a one-man rule somewhere, he has some sense of foreboding about higher powers. That is, he goes off in private and he prays. He may not show it. So there is a varying degree, even if you took what appeared to be on the mortal level, the most dominant figure in some area, or the most dominant figure on this planet. If nothing else, I don't mean this to sound like a sexist joke, but if nothing else, we know this, his wife pushes him around in private at certain times. Everybody is in a hierarchy of dances. Everybody dances dominantly with somebody, some groups, and to some degree everybody dances backwards with somebody else, maybe more than one person. You need to remember that in case you find that, if you can see it as being one of these stumbling blocks for your own binary nervous system and thinking, immediately wants to dismiss this out of hand or to find severe fault with it, that things are not absolutely cut into the powerful and the powerless or the dominant and the submissive. You're right, they're not. But then you make the terrible mistake, the ordinary citizen mistake, if then you dismiss this whole thing out of hand like, well, if it was flawed to start with and you're not correct by saying everybody is either dominant or submissive, or there's a dance going on at any given time and somebody or some groups are dominant and somebody or some groups of people are submissive, then if you're going back up now and say, well, that's not literally true, or if I think it's not literally true, my nervous system tells me it's not, then anything that follows that, using my great powers of sequential logic, then the rest of it's flawed. Don't fall into that. There is a hierarchy. See if I can slip this in on you. You remember I was mentioning the illusion of a middle class and taking as a kind of verbal springboard the reality as it's described out here of the sociological hierarchy of the middle, of the lower, middle, and upper classes. And I was trying to point out to you that even out there the middle class is an illusion. It is just the powerless. It is the lower class, as they used to call it, dressed up a little bit and give them extended credit. That's it. The bums in the street, the winos got no credit. You got a MasterCard. But you're a phone call away from being in the gutter. Everybody is, except the powerful. Now remember, new people are just walking in on this. There is a reality of what I'm saying out there, but that's not the purpose. I'm using that out there to get somewhere else, because I have to use that which is apparently real and observable to you people, or none of this would make sense. I want to speak to you and to pull this into a slightly different area, and that is what is referred to, I'll use everyday terminology, as bureaucracy. Now the bureaucracy, and in times past, when I started this out a few nights back, if you recall, I was saying the middle class was a fairly recent description, and then I took some pains, which amounted to very little, that the English term, because there has been life continually when there would be what appeared to be the rise of some so-called civilization, the Romans, the Greeks, I guess Europe coming out of the Dark Ages or the early Middle Ages, and apparently there began to be some so-called European culture or society every time something, that is some part of life's body, begins to bloom, that life gets works up some good biceps. Of course, you can look at it as being up in the nervous system of life's own brain, its own higher nervous system, but like it gets out of a good place, and there's the Roman Empire, there was the Greeks in their heyday. And at that time, for that to happen, for an apparent part of life's body, that is, some group of people, to flourish, then there becomes always the appearance. I was calling it an illusion for you because I wanted you to look at it a certain way, but there becomes the historical, describable emergence, as they call it, of somebody other than the slaves, the serfs, the powerless, and the powerful. There arises, in times past it was called the trade class. It was called the industrial sector. But what it amounted to, it was never the upper class is sliding down. That's not the way this apparent middle class happens. You all should know that. It's not that the powerful decide, well, I think I'll give up part of my power and become an Amway distributor here in Athens. It is apparently the lower class working themselves out of serfdom, slavery, poverty. All right. I want to bring it up really to date, even better, different than the middle class illusion that life is perpetrated. And I'm going to try to get you to see a little more how this operates, to what end, is bureaucracy. Now, it is a form of this middle class misdirection, of there being a bureaucracy. Now, this has been around. This is just a newer term, at least an English term. The courts. I mean the courts of royalty, not of jurisprudence. But court life in monarchies, aristocracies, when you'd have just a king or a few people, well, let's say a king, make it simple, a figurehead, a one man rules, the many are ruled. Everybody else is powerless. He can't do everything, it would appear. And so he ends up granting out these dukedoms, giving land, giving power, and these people become his aides, and they become his bureaucracy. It is like his will is done through these other people, still a small group, but over which he holds immediate power and death, power of life and death, that he can take away everything they got just like that, because he gave it to them just like that. But now what I want you to try to see, and try and remember, I'm just apparently talking about out there, all of this has a real significance, as always. It wouldn't be out there. Bureaucracy is a different kind. It is a parallel kind of this misdirection of there being a middle class, of there being some third stair in a hierarchy, that there is not simply the king. Let me go back and use that for a second so we can talk about one guy, the king, and then everybody else. That, in a sense, in the 3D world, is the ultimate dominant submissive dance. One guy, he is it. He is the ultimate power. The law is whatever he says it is. He can't be wrong. Whatever he says is it. So he is the dominant dancer, and everybody else in that locale is dancing backwards. There is a hierarchy. Some of them dance backwards a little less than others, a little slower. But it starts out on that basis. But it always ends up, whether it be called the middle class, the trade class, or the one I want you to look at in a certain way, what is referred to as the bureaucracy. And it seems to be a middle ground. It seems to be a third step. So that there's no longer this almost frightening, but this abject division between the king, that is the powerful, and the powerless. There's no longer this almost horrifying to some people gorge. Now there seems to be some sort of bridge, the bureaucracy. Now, among other things that I wanted to try and get you to look toward in the bureaucracy is one thing in particular. They apparently have some authority, but they don't. And one of the prime characteristics of bureaucracy, and anyone in it, is to state what? What should be the motto of all bureaucracies? I'm not responsible. Is that not And remember, this is not a joke at the expense of bureaucrats. This is not a joke or a criticism of life because it deserves none. What should be the motto? If the bureaucracy, let us take of our country, which is the easiest one, circa 1988, if the bureaucracy was its own fourth branch of government, what would be its motto? Did I not about hit it? What do you expect? If you go and approach the bureaucracy all the way from trying to get your driver's license renewed at a local level to trying to talk to the IRS with some question, some complaint you have about your taxes from last year, the way they treated you, what is the least surprising thing? You never analyze. What do you just normally expect you're going to get as soon as you describe to somebody? And they'll sit still a minute. If you start on the phone, no telling, you may stay on the phone 2 or 3 hours that people won't even listen as soon as you start saying, listen, I got a complaint. And they say, wait a minute, that's not my responsibility. Call so-and-so number. And then you call them, you say, I got a complaint. And they may let it go further, and you wait while you're holding your breath, and they say, yeah. And you say, it's about taxes. And they say, from what year? And you say, last year. And they say, well, that's not my responsibility. Well, now, I did not invent, if you were taking these as jokes and attacks, I certainly didn't invent that. You can go to any comedy club, I guess, and it's now all the way back to Grecian times. And they've just been sitting ducks. And it's always been that same kind of complaint. But I want you to see that there is a molecular, there is a cellular basis, there is a question way beyond 3D topography of what appears to be life and politics, that life is up to something through man. Because the bureaucracy, you could say that their prime responsibility is to say, I am not responsible. But do you also see that there is, back in the 3D world, besides the jokes and the attacks, there is validity to that. But can you see, rather than that being an open wound or an open place to attack bureaucracy, can you not see that indeed it is its bloom? It is the flower of bureaucracy. If you could see twisted enough, outside just regular overlapping vision, you would see that in one real sense, this is not a flaw of bureaucracy, it is the purpose of bureaucracy. It is to cushion. I said a bridge between the powerful and the powerless. Now I want you to see it is a kind of insulation, a kind of cushion. Because apparently now, the powerless have some access close to the halls of power. You can't get in and see the president, but by God, you can get in, if you try hard enough, or at least you can call and you can talk to the Assistant Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. You can talk to an assistant or an under-assistant secretary to your regional IRS office. You can start getting close to what appears to be the real seats of power. And to try and really keep the record straight, I should point out that the visible government is not the power anyway. But that's another story I've touched on before. If you want to talk about democracies in places, apparently, if you want to see what life is up to, they always have, what, at least 2 parties, right? And they seem to switch. The Democrats don't stay in forever. The Republicans don't stay in forever because those in power don't care. And in another country, the Christian Democrats are in for a while, and then the Labor Party is in. And then the Christian Democrats are back in. Then maybe the Labor splits into 2 sections. One of them disappears, but then one of the splits come back in. You know why? Because they're not the power. And those in power realize they're like lapdogs. They're like people on a chain. It doesn't matter who's there. But that was kind of a side. At least any of you think the government is the power. But I'm saying the way it appears to people, that the government is the power, which is not, but that's the way it appears. But you can't even get directly to what you would think would be the power. Being an ordinary, fairly intelligent person, you think, oh, the power, if I wanted something done about my health benefits. You would think the power, if not the president, he can't keep up with all it, would be the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, if we still got that cabinet post. The guy appointed by the president to this job. If I could get to him, he could do something. You should know that that is damn well not true. If you got to the head guy, he could explain it, and if you were, again, fairly educated and sophisticated by city standards, you would immediately see the validity of his position, because if he sat there still for you, and you told him this sad story, the way you've been mistreated, he, among everybody, with a better case than the lowest peon in the bureaucracy of that department, he, among all, he could listen to that and he'd say, well, if what you told me is true, it sounds to me that perhaps you have not received the fullest and fairest treatment from this department. But you got to understand, I got 35, almost 36,000 people under me, and I can't be responsible. I agree. If you told me the truth, I sympathize with you, but I'm not responsible. And you'd realize, no, you're not. And he'd say, well, look, I feel bad about it. I want you to go and see so-and-so. Tell him I told you to call. And it's somebody you could have called 4 months ago and would have answered the phone. Of course, they'd have told you the same thing, that, hey, I'm not responsible for that. Or if you ask, would you do so-and-so? A variation, maybe I should throw this in, a variation of I'm not responsible is I cannot make such a decision. It's to ask them, well, can you do this? This is the way I've been mistreated. This is the kind of checks I missed. The guy goes, well, if that's true, then I think you got a reason to complain. You say, all right, now we're getting somewhere. All right, can you go back and tell the department to issue me checks for those missing months? And he could say, all right, if you told me the truth, which I'm not questioning, if you told me the truth, I would say that it sounds like to me that we do owe you those checks. But I personally cannot make such a decision. We'll have to talk to, I'll tell you better yet, here's a number, you call so-and-so and tell him you talk to me. All right, the jokes, you see this, if this was a joke, if I was just some smart-aleck comedian. Those kind of jokes, it's like I get shifted, moved around from place to place. You know, the world's the writers throughout the Western world and some of the Eastern literature, they just replete with these kinds of stories, short stories, smart-aleck jokes about being moved around in the bureaucracy of their power structure as it is visible at their time and place. And it's not a joke. It is the purpose of it. And people can't see it. It is a further kind of insulation. Remember when I brought this up a few nights ago? It is a further kind of insulation that is apparently working inside one's cellular structure that helps protect what seems to be one's immediate consciousness of what's going on. Between that and any feeling that I personally am responsible. And the great reflection is the bureaucracy, and you have one in you. Everyone that passes for middle-class sane has, no matter how shaky seems to be the throne, they have a monarch. That is, that's what seems to be you, your personality. And then there seems to be all of that of you that is the huddled, unwashed masses, the transit that come and go. It's all the things in you that seem to be open, seem to be subject, seem to be fair game for the desire to change. That if I could get rid of these bad habits, which all you're talking about is people laying out on the street drunk, smoking, taking dope, lazy, greedy, all the things that the religions denounce, all the 10 and 12 commandments of don't do so-and-so. What they're talking about are the transients, unwashed masses in you, the parts of your nervous system that apparently at a 3D glance do not contribute to the further health of life. Of course, everybody else is not worried about that, but it could be described as the things in you that seem to not contribute to the benefit of you. And then people go, okay. They don't know why. It can come in the guise of religion that our God, here in our part of the world, said you shouldn't do so-and-so. And even people that don't attend that religion or say, I don't really want to mess with that, their nervous system will by and large tingle. If they never go to church, if they never attend the synagogue or the temple, wherever they are, and they say, hey, you know you people should not get drunk, which is almost universal, if you notice. And your nervous system will go, ooh, like I don't like it. And every time I hear that, it makes me want to go have a drink. But still the nervous system responds to this. This is like the powerless, transient, unsophisticated populace. And it is that the king part of you seems to have the impression, you and everybody, that all right, I should do better. I can do better. Ultimately, I probably must do better. But what? Not the king, because as far as you're concerned, you know, I'm pretty good. I got my faults, I guess, and sometimes you're right, this throne is a little shaky. But you know, as old as I am, I made it this far. I can probably hold out for another 20 or 30 years, and you know, I'll die not in an insane asylum. Or perhaps I will not die in a detox ward. So maybe I'll make it. But still the feeling is that the parts of me that should be changed. You're talking about the powerless parts, the people in you. But between them is this other illusion. There is in you a bureaucracy, and it operates like a cushion of you saying, I should change. I should quit drinking. But all of you know this. Pick any subject, any example, drinking, smoking, bad temper, whatever it is. Every time, apparently, you announce from somewhere, if not directly sitting on the throne, from the general vicinity of the throne room comes this apparent semi-forceful, if not whining announcement. Come on, guys, we're going to stop this. And the people are helpless, but there's a voice that will always say, well, wait, I'm not responsible. That is the bureaucracy in everybody. Or if you say, all right, look, you people know that we should not be getting drunk every day. And even inside you, your own nervous system tingles at that. That is, you apparently know, yeah, I probably shouldn't. But that's not the end of it. Because that was the end of it, then everybody who said, I shouldn't do so-and-so, and the rest of them went, yeah, you're right. Subject closed. All right, I won't. That's it. But no. That's not the way things work. Things can't work that way. There is a bureaucracy that operates like a cushion that says, well, the people holler, yeah, you're right. They can't defend their drunken condition or whatever it is. Their evil ways. They can't defend it, and they just stand there like a possum with a flashlight on it. They just stand. But suddenly to the rescue comes this whole posse of bureaucrats that go, well, it's not our responsibility. It's not our fault. We did not choose to be drunkards. We did not choose to have evil ways, did we? The people go, And it's a fact. It's a fact. But after that, in the city, because of life's own needs, that is a fact. But after that, there's not suddenly come the realization of, well, wait a minute. That is a fact. I am not responsible. No wonder I'm not religious. I don't feel properly guilty. And you would go skipping off. If the gods would allow grown people to go skipping off. But that is not what happens. There is a bureaucracy. Were it not for this bureaucracy, or if you could say it in another way, if it were not for the appearance of a middle class, were it not inside of you the feeling that you do have, even if you didn't like the terms personally, that there is a real bourgeoisie, a real middle class sense of propriety in you. Yeah, I know you grew up and you saved some money around to Greenwich Village for a while, and you smoked dope, and you hung around Europe. You had 114 sexual partners in 8 months when you were 21 or whatever. But all the way through was like this voice of the middle class, if you want to see it instead of bureaucracy, saying, come on, you got to straighten up. Sometimes it sounded like your mother had called you and said, come on, you got to straighten up, and you can't defend yourself. That weak, the powerless part, but there was always an excuse of, hey, Mom, I got to live my own life. Or I'm trying to find myself. Whatever it was, it's the bureaucracy saying, well, there may be some validity to your inquiry, to your complaint, but I'm not responsible. Perhaps something should be done about this, but I got to tell you, I cannot make such a decision. Next. I can't. It operates as a continuing. It is a down-filled, fail-safe position, and it obscures, in a sense, I'm getting closer to what I want some of you to see, it obscures the binary split in toto, not just in my metaphorical use of governments or social norms. Can any of you see it this way? Can you get a glimpse that life having the reality that I told you I would go ahead and call for the time being the continuity class, the powerful, that part of life's body that is born at the 3D level, the people are born powerful. It is the old lines of royalty. It is old lines not of governments, not of elected officials, not run-of-the-mill dictators that come and go, but there is a continuity. The real upper classes, as they used to be called, that even they come and go, and some of these upper class lines fade out and some more come in. But this small group is always there, and it is like a continuity class. All right, in the same way that I have tried to get you to see, that into this life into which you're born, there is the ready-made, intrinsic group of the powerful, very small group, very few cells in comparison to the rest of us, and then the powerless. But then life produces this thing continually that seems to be a middle ground, that is, a middle class, or in governmental allegorical descriptions, it seems to be the bureaucracy. Do you see that this is another form of, may I say, splendid kind of misdirection, and it helps fog over, it helps stretch a kind of verbal, at least gauze, over this big, huge ditch that I've assured you, and you should have heard me several nights ago, under all ordinary conditions, you do not move from the powerless class to the powerful. You just forget about it. It does not happen except under extreme, the conditions I mentioned. The real powerful grant you entree because you did some favor for the king and he returns it, or one I didn't mention, I guess get some of you going for 2 or 3 seconds. The kings, if you remember, historically, have also been inclined to periodically grant favors to a certain class of artistic kind of folks. Like, I like your paintings, little guy. I like the kind of music you've been... Are you the guy that invented the electric lute? Hey, make that guy half a baron. And so suddenly you went from living in a garret, trying to figure out how to make a hookup, an electric hookup to a lute when you didn't even have electricity. You went from that to suddenly being able to walk in, have a name tag that says half baron so-and-so, half baron. That you can now get in sometimes inside the king's throne room into some of the banquets. But you know this. Just one time you decide to pick up your lute and play a number, the king turns around and it's like, I'm sick of hearing that, and that's the end of you. Just like that. You're done for. It's either that or a revolution. Remember, the point is, in the city, you do not move. You can try to marry into it. You can do all kinds of things, but you are not born powerless and then become powerful in a lifetime. That is not, it doesn't happen in your body. The cells do not mutate like that. That is not the process of evolution at the 3D level. So you're not going to move from that group of the submissive to the dominant. You're not going to move from the powerless to the powerful. But do you see that if there was more sensation of that, and I'm not the first person to even use these kind of descriptions, it keeps popping up in history. But what if there was a widespread awareness of this? So what does life do? It continues to bring about this and hold out, and apparently it's true, of a middle ground. That sure, a kid born out in the sticks of some very uncouth Saxons cannot grow up to be king without a revolution. But he might hang around and get the king's attention. He might do him a favor. He might follow him every time he goes hunting in hopes that he'll fall off his horse so he can rush up and say, "Here, king, can I help you?" The king go, "What a nice kid. Give that kid a dukedom." You can always hope that, but you know this. By seeing the illusion that you're not going to join the powerful class, but something like that might happen, or that you might just work diligently. Just work your way up in the bureaucracy, and before you die, you might be up to the point that you did, or that you were able to put a little more on your table than warm tar and bark. In other words, you might become a part of what seems to be this middle ground. Do you understand how life is using this? There are several ways I can do it, but one is a kind of protection to this extremely important continuity class. It helps protect them. That if things are going to operate as they are wont to do on the 3D level, I remind you people once more, especially just wanderers in and out to see these tapes, that all these descriptions, when I say 3D, an observable reality, it is on the basis that I fully understand, I see, and some of you are getting the whole point of this kind of activity, that everything you can observe is lacking. It is flawed. Not because of your fault, not because of sight, not because of consciousness, but that's the way things are, that all of it, what is going on, is not seen. It is not observable. But at the level that things seem to operate in the city, you do realize that if there was a widespread, overwhelming perception in human consciousness that, hey, it's us against the few, that they're actually running it all, and I can work my little ass to the bone, and I might get in some position that the king would give me an ID and I could get inside the palace. I might work my way up into the bureaucracy. But I'm always a phone call away. I'm at somebody's whim. I'm not powerful. This is a dream. Of course, in the city, those who are wired up to do that, they take the dream as reality. That is, you can't think about such as that. Ordinary people would go nuts. If ordinary people could go nuts. But those that do seem to work their way up do get elected to public office here in these democratic countries. Those that apparently have gained the king's favor, and he gave them some position. Maybe, just maybe, if you don't get too close to the king, you don't hang around him when he's drunk, and he gives you a dukedom, you might be able to hold on to it until the king dies, or until you die. In other words, you might get this sensation of being semi-powerful, having some authority, which you don't. You're just operating at somebody's whim, somebody powerful's whim. I might be able to last another 20 or 30 years if I don't tick him off, or if I'm not around when he's in a bad mood. But it is still, when I say it's an illusion that you've got some apparent authority, but it's at somebody else's absolute whim. You have apparently changed positions in the bloodstream, in the nervous system of life. But where I was, if you recall, I was trying to get you to see that if things operated as they appear to want to operate at the 3D level, if there was a widespread, almost universal perception of there being this absolute dichotomy between the powerful and the powerless, and you can't move from one to the other, do you not see that that would be almost begging for trouble? There would be the propensity, would you grant us this, of widespread questioning of the affair. That if the 96% realized 4% of the other cells passing as humans, like me and you, they pull on their pants the same way as we do. That's what the powerless always like to say. Which, of course, they don't. The king has somebody put his pants on for him. But there would be, let us say, the propensity, well, how about at least the possibility that the 96% over a long period of time might really whip themselves up into some kind of dangerous lather. It is like a safety valve. It is like a cushion inside of life's body, inside of your nervous system, that there seems to be a third possibility. Now, where have we heard this? Of not me pointing out all of the dichotomies, all of the binary divisions which always seem to wrap everything up. But can you see, now that I've pointed out these examples, that life does use a kind of pointing to, with ordinary people, a kind of pointing to a third possibility. That, all right, and that's of course very subtle, and life doesn't talk this way into your own nervous system. But all right, here you are, you were born in a poor circumstance, and you keep reading all the fancy magazines, and you want to work your way up, and you want to be part of the jet set, and look how poor you are. All right, you're going to work hard. You're probably going to get some kind of scholarship to Harvard, and maybe you can get in with a law firm on Wall Street. Maybe you work your way up. It is like a third possibility. But I have already for the last 2 nights, when I talk about the middle class and now the bureaucracy, and I say it for a real reason. It is a kind of true illusion. The real thing, not some phony baloney illusion. I'm talking about a real illusion. That there is such a thing. Could any of you take this a little bit further? That's what I was going to try and ask you. Could you see, and it's around you everywhere, I'm just beginning to bring it up now, that all of the binary combos in the world, from good and bad to the powerful and the powerless, that all of these binary combos, in a sense, are seeking an apparent third possibility just for a buffer, for a cushion, because of the raw, direct connection between good and evil. That there it is. That you get up to good and evil, and you're talking about serious, distinct contours that the nervous system wants to say. Somebody's nervous system wants to stand and say, listen, there is good and there is evil. And we all know that. There is no middle ground. You people have got to come to your senses. You're talking about a frontier. You're talking about two trains that are going to run head on, and yet in the nervous system. After all the time I spent trying to get you to see that, which is really no big deal, except it's almost impossible to remember it. There is this continuing, once you begin to feel it in your own nervous system, and then apparently it's running out there all the time. It is like some unspecified. It's never been named, but it's like a searching, a longing of all these binary combos that get together. They're just there. It's like them searching for at least the appearance, something we can talk about, of a third possibility. Third possibility between right and wrong, I guess you could say, a minor one is the theory, the idea of situational ethics. That things are not quite that simple. Or perhaps sometimes, like, well, if you'd let a young helpless child, you saw it fall in the river and you wouldn't help it. Maybe that's real good and evil. But how about this, folks? We're sophisticated. How about the fact that you see an obvious way that you could chisel some of your tax liability this year? And it's a proven fact, statistically. People admit, anonymously, that 74% of the American people chisel or would if they could on their tax return. Now, we can't call that good and evil. We don't believe as good Baptists or Jews or Presbyterians that the gods are going to condemn us to purgatory or Cleveland just for knocking off a few bucks on our income tax return. So, it's just sort of a gray area. It is as though all of the binaries search, and it just comes and goes, and of course they do not have the prominence. They're not spoken of in the same way. And as I said, it's always very fleeting, the thing about situational ethics. We do not have a third of the world's population believing in that. We do not have any large number of people in life's body on the planet Earth that at any given time would give any great credence to it. They might say, well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but let's get down to it. There's right and there's wrong. It is in your nervous system, this kind of unspecified, rather ambiguous, and never been named. As far as I know, I like being humble. As far as I know, I'm the first person to ever verbally have pointed this out in the history of humanity. Save the awards. There is this unspecified floating around seeking of all these binaries, looking for a kind of apparent third area that at least for a while can ease the pressure, can ease the apparent dangerous conflict if the real powerful and the powerless were immediately living eyeball to eyeball. This 4% with the 64%, the part of your nervous system that seems to be in charge, and then the part that is not in charge, that they were living like this. And you didn't have the possibility of this bureaucracy in you, so that you said, I've got to change. I don't know why, but I know I have got to change. Your face will, all right, change, damn it. It would be like the immediate revolution. It could be self-destructive. There has got to be this sort of floating crap game that seems to hold out the possibility of a third area, and it's like a minor timeout. It's like, yes, I know there's good and bad. I know I should change, and I know I haven't changed. But wait a minute. It's like you can take a side step off the dance floor for a second. It's like the tango band, the accordion, the violin will hold that one chord for just a second. Maybe hit a good diminished chord and go down. And it's like you can quit dancing for a second, and I'm trying to get my breath. I'm trying to, I need to ease up on myself. Oh, okay, and then you're back doing it. It is not talked about. It would not be described this way. If it were described this way at all, it would be a kind of general denunciation of a third area, such as situational ethics, that the majority of the people that seem to be running the world, the bureaucracies, the apparent governments, they would say, well, that may be fit fodder for philosophers to discuss in the halls and the towers of ivy, but now here in the world, you people got to realize there is right and wrong. That is, you people have got to pay your taxes and be fair about it. You got to obey the traffic laws. There is a right and wrong. Now, you can discuss these other possibilities philosophically, but there is a right and wrong. The politicians say that. The apparent seats of government say that. And, of course, the religions say that. Can you see that there is floating around, and we're running out of my side of the tape tonight, which I guess is just as well because I can leave it now with you. But all the binaries You can feel it in your own nervous system. This is getting pretty subtle, which makes it real pregnant and explosive. They're inside your own nervous system, and you've never described it. This is the first time I've tried to put words on it. No one's ever described it to you, but it is there, that all of the things that seem to be clear-cut with you, whatever it is, like I have got to do so-and-so. And then there is the immediate resistance. Always has been. If there wasn't, you would no longer be saying, well, I've got to do so-and-so. You would have fucking already done it. But here you stand like this, but that pressure does not continue all the time. You couldn't stand it, an ordinary person. Now, I've got to change. Well, I can't. I got to change. Well, I can't. I got to change. Well, I can't. They couldn't take the pressure. It would be the powerful and the powerless, literally eyeball to eyeball. Forget the Cold War in the United States and the USSR, supposedly all these atomic missiles aimed at each other, and the pressure. That'd be nothing. Internally, you would blow up the world, your world. To be like that, there is this unnamed, heretofore unnamed, and I, of course, still hadn't named it, except to say that it seems to be a possible third area. And it acts like a cushion. And one of the things I wanted you to really consider, in one sense, it acts as a cushion to protect the powerful in you, the powerful in the world. It's not the bureaucracy. You do know this. If we're not talking about out here, the bureaucracy is not for the benefit of the people. You do know that, don't you? You knew that. That's why you laugh at jokes when comedians pick on the bureaucracy and how they treat you when you try to get your license renewed, and how they, apparently go out and give anti-IQ tests to hire people in lower echelons of bureaucracy. I'm sorry, sir, we're going to have to fire you. You're too smart. You're not dumb enough. There are those jokes. Is why you laugh. It is not for the benefit of the powerless. It is not for the benefit of the people. It's for the benefit of the powerful. It is always for the benefit of above. Another one, I know I don't have time tonight, one of the other great misdirections is, when we're living in the midst of it, is the idea of the rule by the many, democracies. They've been talking about that all the way from Aristotle. But that, hey, we're in a different situation because it's us. I got a free vote. My vote counts as much as a Rockefeller's vote. It's beautiful. It almost takes my breath away every time I think about it. And that people are willing to stand up and hurl tomatoes, give their life for the fact that, boy, I love living here because it's a democracy, and my vote, my one man, I only make $75 a week as a janitor, and my vote counts the same as a damn Rockefeller's vote. God, it's great to be living in a democracy. It's just death-defying. It just takes my little breath away to see what life has done. At any rate, there is always this protection, and it goes to the next highest echelon. Things are not arranged to protect the one below. Never, never, never. That would be self-defeating. Now remember, we're not talking about life out there. We're not talking about political affairs. We're not talking about Rockefellers and janitors. If things were arranged to defeat a lower level, it'd be a form of suicide. You'd be continually trying to protect your less profitable sides, those sides of you, those aspects of you, those feelings, those thoughts that indeed tell you that if I pursued this, I would be operating not in my own best interest. Then if there were safeguards, if there were steps and areas set up to protect in an echelon, in a spectrum of dividing it up, a lower part, it's suicide. It might be slow, but it is suicide. And it would be the same to life, that its primary objective is to protect the powerless. That is not its primary objective, which is one reason it has, on the 3D level, man's nervous system wired in such a way that to hear otherwise sounds to be just almost unspeakable. As I said, I don't know whether it's you, I keep looking for a way to try to shock you that I know what I'm pointing at. It almost sounds like it's on the verge of being the ultimate fascism. That, boy, life can't be like that. No. Right. Whatever you do, don't look around. Of course, in the city, that makes no sense because that sounds sarcastic. It sounds like pessimism, or it sounds like some form of fatalism, that they would say, well, hey, all you're saying is life's a pain in the ass, and we're all going to die, and we're here on some unmerciful journey. No. But to would-be revolutionists, don't ever look around. don't ever really pursue the look-around method, and don't ever be able to see that everything overlaps, and where it overlaps, there is a secret that skips and it smiles and it sings and it doesn't even have to hide. It's just there.